Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice to hear discussions so far. My name is Cassandra Kist. I'm a researcher and lecturer at the University of Strathclyde, and my work is mainly at the intersection of human-computer interaction and heritage contexts. So today I'll be talking about trustworthy conversational agents for government records. Specifically, I'm asking, how can we design conversational agents for public users of government records in such a way that they can sustain trust and credibility in these organizations? And I'm going to be doing that by drawing on my research from an adjacent field, which is about conversational agents in museums. So I'm going to start out by discussing a little bit about the relation between trust, authentic experiences, and interaction design. I'll define what I mean by conversational agents, and then I will draw on my research to discuss some of the reasons why professionals in museums are implementing conversational agents and some of the reasons behind their design decisions. And on the flip side, what are some of the visitor perceptions around these technologies? And then if we're still all together, I will extrapolate some takeaways for what that could mean for the more sensitive topic of government records. I think, as we all know, heritage organizations and record organizations are perceived to be guardians of truth and reliable knowledge. And there's been a lot of pressure and motivation to adopt and implement AI technologies to manage records and enable greater access to records and meet audience expectations. And this has been creating some tensions and anxieties about how we can do this while still maintaining trusted and credible identities, not only for government organizations and record organizations, but also for libraries, galleries, and museums. So in the context of museums, something referred to as authentic experiences has long been strived for and idealized. And what I mean by authentic experiences is something that visitors perceive to be as genuine, real, and true. And this has been idealized in part because generating or sustaining genuine experiences is perceived to cultivate trust and credibility in museum organizations. So recently, a colleague of mine at the University of Strathclyde has theorized that authentic experiences in museums are constituted by three kind of dimensions. The first is an emotional dimension, so visitors will have some sort of personal connection or empathetic engagement. The second is a material dimension, and in museums, this is related to connecting to historic objects, so of great significance. And a factual dimension, so interpretation is connected to verifiable and sort of traceable facts. So importantly, different interaction designs and interpretation techniques can affect authentic experiences in different ways, and including with conversational agents, which I'll come back to later. So I just wanted to briefly mention, I think we're all on the same page about what conversational agents are. Increasingly, we associate it with generative AI like ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini. They are not always based on those technologies, but they tend to replicate forms of human-like interaction, and depending on their underpinning technology, they can enable both the retrieval of information, its synthesis, and the generation of new human-like content. There's a wide range of different types of conversational agents. There's some that are a bit more traditional, and I won't go through each of these. But I think we've heard a lot about retrieval augmented generation in the last few days, and this was a common type of technology used by the case studies in my research. So now that we have a bit of grounding about authentic experiences and what I mean by conversational agents, I want to talk a little bit about the research I undertook in heritage organizations. So these are two pilot studies which were a little bit more scoping in nature. I undertook 6 case studies of conversational agents already implemented in museum contexts. So I undertook some interviews with museum professionals about their motivations for implementing these and about why they designed them in certain ways. And the second was a survey distributed to 200 people in the UK who visit museums, covering a range of genders and ages. And this was to scope their perceptions of conversational agents in the physical context of museum exhibits. This is just a list of the case studies. I won't go through each of them, but They were chosen because they were very varied. They were used with a wide range of collections. They had different interaction designs. Um, and they were all very recent. And at the time when I undertook the research, they were all still in operation. So I could go in and test them out and see how they were functioning as well. So for instance, the first one I have listed is Simulated Nature's Perspective. And this was an initiative by the University of Cambridge Museum of Zoology in collaboration with a tech company called Nature's Perspective. Essentially, this conversational agent appears as an individual natural history specimen from the museum, and users can interact with it and ask it questions about itself and its heritage. And one that's very different is Clio 1.0, which is a conversational agent at the London Museum, which is a kind of more disembodied, traditional-looking conversational search interface that enables you to engage with the online collections. Those are just a few. And I just have up on the screen some screenshots of what the interfaces look like for these. You can see that there's some variations there. Okay, so why are conversational agents being used in these contexts? So based on the case studies and my interviews with professionals, there was two quite common themes, which is around accessibility and personalization. So these were perceived, probably not unsurprisingly, but as ways to make complex information more digestible, more accessible. It was also seen to be a way to adapt to users' language preferences. So maybe they're not using English or they're using a different language, and also kind of their level of interest. So it could adapt to how much information do they really want to know about this topic. Importantly, something that we've been talking about the other day was also being able to use, your own words, being able to type in a full string and not keywords. And that was seen to create more of a friendly interface between users and visitors and the heritage organizations. It's also perceived by interviewees as a way to support more dynamic visitor experiences. So providing alternative lenses to the collections from maybe different perspectives, and also a way to kind of cultivate surprising connections across collections and materials. And of course, it was seen to align with the changing user expectations of wanting synthesized information that is more back and forth rather than a traditional search or static audio guide. So what interaction design decisions are being made and why? So intended user experiences and different organizational values shape design decisions related to two key aspects of design. There's others, but I'm going to focus on two. The first is the level of embodiment of a conversational agent. And what I mean by that is if it has an avatar or a persona, personality, a perspective. And the second is the knowledge boundaries of the conversational agent in terms of, is it only focused on specific collections, specific material? Can it go beyond? Can it have small talk? And these can be placed on design decisions of professionals can be placed, I think, on a spectrum from initiatives that are meant to support more immersive and narrative-driven experiences to those that support more collections discovery. And there's a lot of overlaps here and a little bit of ambiguity, but I think this spectrum is useful to understand these decisions. So along the spectrum, based on the intended user experiences, design decisions reflect how staff try to balance kind of the intended engagement with how it relates back to material collections and factual dimensions as well of either immersion or more collections discovery. So initiatives with an intended user experience of immersion, staff made decisions to have higher levels of embodiment. So these often had an avatar, a voice, a personality, and these experiences were quite subjective. Comparatively, conversational agents intended for collections discovery tended to be disembodied, more neutral interfaces without a personality, but often had kind of more friendly tone as well. Associated with immersion was also wider knowledge boundaries. So this enabled users to have small talk or ask off-topic questions, enabling them to follow a certain narrative or a perspective or experience. Comparatively, the collections discovery agents, knowledge boundaries tended to be quite strict. So if you were going to ask it something about maybe itself or about football, it would say, I don't know, or I can't answer that question. So significantly for government records, I think we could probably learn the most from the collections discovery agents and the decisions made there. The professionals involved in these decisions, such as with Cluny Museum, London Museum's Clio, the Montreal Museum of Art conversational agent, they avoided avatars and embodiment to reduce risk of deception or misattribution to a real person and avoid kind of contentious questions about who the agent is. They also tried to sidestep users maybe negative perceptions associated with service bots that I think people still come to museums with. Instead, they try to enable authentic experiences of collections discovery by relying on friendly tones and the use of different prompts. And these prompts draw connections to a wide range of maybe materials or themes or topics in collections and offering different lenses on the collections as well. So they also limited small talk to reduce risks of kind of misuse and risk of hallucination. So before I get to some of the takeaways, I want to briefly mention some of the findings from the second pilot study, which was a survey about visitor perceptions of conversational agents in the physical context of museums. So here I'm just presenting on concerns, but just importantly, visitors also saw lots of potentials for conversational agents as well. So about half of respondents had or maybe had concerns about using conversational agents in museum exhibits. And when analyzing the responses to our open-ended survey questions, there's about 3 themes related to these concerns that we extracted. The first was the potential to distract from heritage collections. So there was a feeling that agents may take away from the spectacle of being in an exhibit, take away from maybe your attention to physical collection objects. The second was take away from humanistic experiences. So there was a feeling that maybe a conversational agent may detract from conversations you have with your friends and family while you're visiting. But also there's a perception that actually the museum is filled with these rich human narratives that have like a type of soul, and conversational agents were seen in opposition to that. And the last was to depersonalize heritage experiences. So there was concern that maybe the conversational agent wouldn't have good enough knowledge base to answer very specific questions that would fulfill your curiosity. There's also, of course, concern that it might hallucinate and give you false information. And some users said that they wouldn't use a conversational agent unless they knew how their data was being used. So taking some inspiration from these findings, I think we can extrapolate some considerations for the more front-end design of conversational agents for government records. And to just preface this, of course, this would have to be very contextually based on the organization and also culture. So the first is around transparent absence. So what I mean by this is for your conversational agent, prioritizing tone and voice over an avatar may maintain trust and avoid sort of deception and some of these ethical questions around embodiment. In terms of knowledge boundaries, considering strict knowledge boundaries in terms of limiting small talk or off-topic exchanges, which can maintain credibility but also avoid misuse. Third is personalization. So this was quite important to professionals, but it also came up in the visitor surveys. So being able to adapt to user interests, their desired language, and giving the level of information that they want to receive. There's also a desire to prompt different connections to different topics and collection objects. And this could be quite relevant for maybe providing adjacent records to the ones that you're initially interested in. And finally, transparency. So in terms of how user data is used, this could be made quite transparent to users, and also about how the agent works, how it functions, and linking the responses to the related objects and where that information is coming from. The specific record can maintain those sort of levels of transparency. So those are my initial thoughts. And if you would like to know more about the user surveys, you can find out using the QR code. Thank you so much.